Welcome to the inaugural edition of Hold the Line with me, Buck Sexton. Let's get right to it. We always knew this was going to be a dogfight. I've been telling you for weeks, months really, if you listen to my radio show, that this was going to be trench warfare. So that's what we're in the middle of right now. You're looking at a battle over an election that's going to take us into the courtroom most likely, and who knows how it's really going to shake out. But this I will say to you, we're going to keep fighting, and what a time to be alive. What a moment in our politics. Look, I got to tell you, I'm still confident somehow, I couldn't even really explain it, but I'm confident in a Trump win. As I said the day of the election, no matter what, the Trump movement is going to continue on. But here's the part of all this that is already really upsetting the liberals. With what we know right now, nobody would take them seriously if they make the claim, or try to, that Donald Trump's version of Republican politics has been repudiated. That's clearly not the case. Take a listen to what CNN contributor Van Jones had to say about this just last night.
We wanted to see a repudiation of this direction for the country. And the fact that it's this close, I think, it hurts. It just hurts. I think people got their hopes up looking at those polls. The political victory, I think, is still possible because you still have Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, Nebraska, too. The political victory may yet come. Mm-hmm. But I think I have to be honest tonight that I think people who, there were people who were hoping for a big repudiation, and that has not yet come. And a lot of people are hurt and scared tonight in the Democratic Party.
It's not going to come either. No matter what, it's a very close election. Whether the president ends up winning or losing, it solidified the fact that the Trump coalition of the future is going to be one on the right of a populist conservatism that's here to stay. It's also a repudiation of the elite consensus that Donald Trump was going to just get destroyed, especially in minority communities. They said he was going to be run out of Washington the first chance the American people got a shot. Nope, that wasn't the case at all. In fact, we know Trump has won Ohio. We know he's won Florida, that he's kept most of the major red states. Now, they have called Wisconsin and Michigan for Joe Biden. Pennsylvania still hangs in the balance. What goes on next year? Will there be legal challenges ahead? And could that, in fact, change the course of this election? Let's understand, these are not Russian bots we're talking about influencing the election. If there are legal challenges, it's about the very sanctity of the ballots that were cast themselves. So we have to chase this down. If there's any illegal activity going on, it's incumbent upon Trump and the entire campaign to make sure that it is stopped right away and that there's accountability. Of course, the other big story immediately came clear last night was how much the pollsters were catastrophically wrong. I don't mean wrong by a little bit. I mean wrong by a lot. According to the Real Clear Politics averages, the president was down considerably in almost every important swing state. For example, in Ohio, Trump beat that average of polls by 7 points. I mean, that's massive, right? And they made these errors in state after state after state, and it was all in one direction. What are the chances of that? They all indicated a Biden victory? What are the statistical realities of that just magically happening? The polling community we saw is just like the journalism community, my friends. I've been saying this for quite some time. It's a really serious problem. Polling is used not only to give you a snapshot of perception, but also to drive perception. It's meant to tell people what to think and has the attendant causation of making people want to agree with what that consensus position is. For example, if you find out that 80% of people favor common sense restrictions on gun control, well, that number gets out there and people start to say, well, I want to be part of the 80% that favors it. And in an election, it couldn't be any more clear, right? If you hear that in your home state, Biden's up 8 points, 12 points, perhaps even 17 points, don't you want to be a part of that consensus? You want to be on the winning team, right? No one wants to vote for a loser. The skewed polls also have the effect, therefore, of depressing the vote. Are you going to wait in line for an hour if you think you're going to lose by almost 20 points? Are you even going to bother mailing in a ballot? Why take the time, right? Look, I know how that feels, by the way. I voted here in New York City, which was never going to be a place that Trump managed to flip. These polls, though, really do feel like they were meant to suppress the Republican vote and also to please the liberal media, to make sure the polls are not just paid for, but also cited all across these publications. That much, I think, is obvious at this point. They created a perception of Biden as the inevitable candidate, just like they tried to create a perception of Hillary as an inevitable candidate in 2016. It's not possible to explain all the skewed polls in favor of Joe Biden without any polls that seem to favor Donald Trump to anything near a similar degree. Come on, folks. Nowhere was Donald Trump overestimated in the same way that Joe Biden's support was overestimated. It was systematic. It was clear. So pollsters now join journalists and fact checkers as professions that have been tainted by bias and that no person should take at face value anymore on good faith. Another big takeaway from the election night itself is it looks like Donald Trump, based on all the exit polling, all the data we've seen, dramatically outperformed usual GOP expectations in a presidential election with the African American community and with the Latino community. The first thing I want to say for those in both those communities who voted for Trump is welcome. It's great to have you on the Trump team. Honored to be shoulder to shoulder with you to save our country from the crazy libs who want to ruin it with socialism, even bigger government, and all kinds of absurd policies. As for what this does to the liberal media narrative, what are the primary objections we hear against Donald Trump? There are two I think you can point to in this most recent election cycle. One of them would be that Donald Trump mishandled COVID so badly that he's essentially responsible for every COVID death in America, which is just, this is outrageous. That's an intellectually and morally unsupportable claim. But then you also have the narrative that Donald Trump is this evil racist. How many times did they lie about what Trump said in Charlottesville? How many times did the media lie about what he said about illegal immigrants, all being rapists and murderers? Unfortunately, those lies have been pretty effective. It's created a widespread perception about the president that's very hard to throw off. And it's kind of tough to blame people when they're supposed to be able to rely on the objective journos and the news media. But many voters rejected those lies last night, including many minority voters. Not only did Trump outperform expectations, he outperformed almost every previous GOP candidate with the African American community for decades. He also outperformed the Latino community, especially in key states like Florida. There's something going on right now, in just the same way that the media missed Trump's rise and his win in 2016, they're missing a shift that's occurring on the right that is incorporating these new minority voters into an expanding GOP tent that could be the future of the Republican Party. A republicanism that is rooted in traditional Judeo-Christian pro-American values, a multiracial working class coalition within the GOP that might include aspiring Latino business owners, skilled African American laborers. These are just Americans, folks, working a job who realize they've got to get ahead a bit with less regulation, less taxation, help them along the way. Socialism's not going to make their lives better. And this is just the beginning of this revelation that Trump has helped bring about. This is just the crack in the dam of what could be coming. Could be a game changer for within the GOP if this trend continues. Could be a nightmare for Democrats, of course, which would be fantastic. Without identity politics and without being able to count on over 90% of black voters consistently going for Democrats, the Democrat Party's got a big problem. And the more people that come to recognize that the Democrat Party, and certainly the left-wing national media, caters to the cultural and political interests of Brooklyn hipsters, the better it is for the national level GOP. The more that perception changes, the better off I think we will all be. So no matter how this election turns out, whether Trump or Biden wins, Democrats should be worried for the long term. The Trump movement is here to stay, friends. All right, enough about that. We've got a fight on our hands right now that might go on for days, even weeks. When we come back, we'll talk to my good friend Ben Ferguson about how things are shaking out. Stand by. Welcome back. While the country awaits the outcome of the 2020 election, let's talk about the death of mainstream media's credibility. We've got what we witnessed last night, a huge disconnect between the media's prediction of a blue wave versus reality. And as pollster Frank Lunt said last night, the political polling profession is done. It is devastating for my industry. We are finished. So what are they missing about America? And how is this distrust in the system further dividing our country? Here to weigh in with reaction, our friend Ben Ferguson, host of The Ben Ferguson Show. My man, how are you?
You and I have never been this tired in our entire lives, am I right?
We're both making a good show of it, staying up here for, God, I think I got 4 hours, maybe 3 hours of sleep last night. But the country hangs in the balance, Ben, so let's dive into this. First off, media / pollsters, terrible night for them that they're probably never recovering from, right?
No, they're done. I mean, I was talking with Lentz last night on Good Morning Britain with Piers Morgan. He basically was saying we suck at our jobs and everybody should be fired. Even Tucker was saying this last night. I mean, this was, if there was anything that we saw last night across the board, it was how worthless pollsters actually are. I do believe, though, part of this is because conservatives like myself are not going to be honest with these pollsters because we think they're part of the mainstream media. They're hacks. They always want the left to win. They always give the benefit of the doubt in polling to the left. And I think you'll never get an accurate count from a pollster ever again as long as you're polling Republicans and conservatives, because I want you to look bad. I want to screw with you. I don't trust you. I don't believe you. I think you're part of the media, and this profession is dead as we know it, and I'm glad. I mean, some of the screw-ups here, Buck, it's not even just nationwide. They were talking about losing 10 to 15 seats, some of these credible pollsters in the House. It looks like, from what Kevin McCarthy was saying earlier, we're talking about a 6 or 7, maybe even 8-seat gain or more. That's almost an 18 to 22 seat difference when it comes just to those races. They screwed this up with the Senate. They had it that they thought the Senate was probably going to either be maybe one ahead for Republicans. Some had it as even 2 or 3 for the Democrats. Screwed that one up pretty well. And important races that we've seen across the country. So look, it is obvious your vote still matters in America. We're seeing historic turnout. That's, if there's any silver lining in this, the pollsters could not control people, and I like that.
There's a lot of back and forth today, and I'm not sure it's going to stop anytime soon, about who has already won, Ben. Here's what the president said that got the libs, very upset. Play it.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. It's a very sad moment. To me, this is a very sad moment, and we will win this, and as far as I'm concerned, we already have won it.
So the president here saying, well, you just heard it, that he wants to take this into the courts now. How do you think that plays out? What are some of the key elements as you see them?
Look, I think there was a lot in the media, first off, that just completely misconstrued what the president was saying. His point was, he says, we want the vote to count and we want it to stop. His point was, we don't want a bunch of votes to be harvested after the deadline. We don't want there to be signatures that don't match up. We don't want new ballots to be coming in after Election Day that should not be counted, and we will fight that. That is fighting for the integrity of all voters, whether you're Republican voting, an independent, a Democrat, first-time voter, or a hack voter. This is what the president was implying here, is we need to make sure we have uniformity and the laws are being followed. Now, of course, the media says, well, the president's trying to steal an election here. He's saying he's won when he didn't. How dare him say this? He's dividing the nation. What a horrible president he is. Look, you and I both saw this last night. You had in some states where 150,000, 130,000 votes were being added, and all of them were added for Joe Biden. Not a single vote was added for Donald Trump. And then Twitter censors the president for pointing that out, and others that pointed this out. And then all of a sudden the state AG comes out and they're like, oh, well, hold on, we had a glitch, but we're going to fix it now. Look at the disaster that is in Arizona right now, for goodness sakes. There were people in line who got alerts on their phone from news networks saying that it's over. It's over. And now we find out, oh, we found a couple million votes we got to count today, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day. You look at Wisconsin, you look at Pennsylvania. And so what I think the president and what the legal team's going to do, I talked to them earlier today, is they are going to make sure that the laws are applied appropriately, that the votes are protected of all voters who did it the right way, and that there are not shenanigans being done to try to pull an election in a state like this against Donald Trump. I don't trust the governor, for example, in Michigan. I think it's pretty clear in Pennsylvania.
Ben, I want to jump in there. I want to jump in there because we have something to show everybody. Did you see this map where all of a sudden there was 100% of roughly what I think 100,000 new votes, over 100,000 new votes overnight that all went for Joe Biden? A statistical impossibility. When the official, and this was an official map, when this is happening and everyone knows that that's just not plausible, and people ask questions, the first response shouldn't be, oh, stop spreading conspiracies and having Twitter shut this stuff down. Clearly, there was an issue here.
There was an issue, and people that were on Twitter that saw this, all they said was, well, this is clearly a reason to go to court right away, right? Because this is an impossible thing that cannot happen. If it happened for Trump, it would be impossible. If it happened for Biden or any other candidate, it's impossible that 100% of these votes get uploaded and bam, they all go to one candidate. Now, of course, the state this afternoon said, well, it was a glitch. It's going to be fixed. No one worry about this. Yet you had Twitter banning people and shutting down these tweets and saying, we're shutting down your account for pointing out the obvious, that what happened is impossible. And I think that's the reason why people do not trust the system. I think the scariest thing that we've learned, Buck, from last night is Democrats have figured out that mail-in voting is their secret weapon going forward. And if you don't think they're going to try to figure out how to implement this in liberal states in 2 years from now in the midterms and 4 years from now in the next presidential election, you're not paying attention, because this was a test market. COVID gave them this gift and they realized, wow, if we don't have to have people show up to vote, and we don't have to make them be responsible to actually request a ballot to vote, and we just send them all a ballot to anyone that we think may still be alive, that may still live in an address, and we don't have to check signatures, damn it, we can win a bunch of elections. Let's go.
President Trump tweeted out earlier today, they're working hard to make up 500,000 vote advantage in Pennsylvania disappear ASAP. Likewise, Michigan and others. You know, Ben, I was seeing video of an absentee polling center up in Michigan where they were putting up boards on the windows so people couldn't see what's going on because it's getting all heated outside. It's getting crazy. Should we have faith that this system is actually going to work out as planned? I feel very hard for me to think that the Philadelphia municipal vote counting machinery is beyond reproach, but maybe I'm cynical.
You know, I born and raised, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, and I had a Democratic mayor tell me once, after he won a very tight election where riots were threatened if the Republican candidate who was the incumbent even questioned the vote or asked for a recount. He said to me 10 years after that election, he said, Ferguson, let me tell you something. He said, for every hour that happens after midnight and you don't have an answer, somebody that ran for office is getting screwed. And it might be one of the best political things I've learned in my lifetime. I think every hour this continues on after midnight last night, somebody's trying to figure out a way to screw somebody else, screw somebody out of their vote. And I don't think the American people should have a lot of faith in these political governors. I mean, you had people saying before the election yesterday, there is no way that we will have a vote count tonight that will say that Donald Trump wins. I mean, I'm sorry, what? I'm supposed to have faith in you to be counting my votes when you're literally telling the voters in your state that there's no way Trump will win tonight? That is what makes people not trust the system. And for goodness sakes, Buck, it's 2020. How hard is it to count a damn vote with all the technology that we have? And this should never happen. I will give credit to Florida. They had their act together. They learned their lessons from the recount and the hanging chads. And they had all these votes counted early on in the night. They were early votes, and they gave us real numbers, and that's how it should go. But this is the United States of America in 2020, and we're still dealing with this crap. And I think part of the reason why we are is people realize if there are issues, then there are possible advantages that I can take to my team with these issues. And I think that's what you're seeing in some of these states right now.
All right, Ben, we'll see how it shakes out. Thanks so much for joining us. The Ben Ferguson Show, everybody. Check it out. Ben, thank you.
Thanks, Buck.
Coming up after the break, President Trump made some headway with key demographics this election. We're going to drill down into some of those numbers. As we discussed earlier, with the president outperforming a number of demographics that have traditionally voted Democrat, Democrats might have a problem. See, Trump has built the beginnings of a multi-ethnic, multiracial, working-class coalition that could reshape the GOP in cycles to come. Let's drill down on some of those numbers. It's time to open up the Buck Brief. We'll make it seem like our numbers are all so secretive there, but these are actually all out in the public view. These are not top secret, I swear. So there's some really interesting stuff that happened last night that shows that one of the dominant media narratives out there of how Trump not only is of course, a fascist and a racist and all these terrible things they constantly say about the president that I think are untrue and reckless, but they also show that there's a disconnect between what people in communities that the media pretends to speak for actually think in many cases, and also what the trend is within those communities versus what you're seeing on the TV screen. For example, President Trump made significant gains in a historically Democratic and Hispanic Rio Grande Valley area in Texas. We can show you that one on the screen. And now this is one that went for Hillary Clinton back in 2016, 65 to 32. And we're showing you this sort of map of Texas to give you a sense. There's a lot of red, but down the Rio Grande, you see there's actually a whole bunch of blue. This is a majority Hispanic county that went 52-47, Zapata County, 52-47 for Donald Trump this time around. My old colleague and friend Sagar and Jetty put it up on his Twitter as follows here. He says, I still absolutely cannot believe Trump won Zapata County. There's no other national Republican in America who could have done that. Just incredible. Now, if you're a standard media commentator, you would say, well, hold on a second, this can't be possible because we've been told so many times, countless times, that President Trump has almost no support within the Hispanic community because of the immigration policies that he's been championing, but also for the infamous now rapists and murderers line, which the media always takes out of context to suggest that the president was saying the flatly untrue and flatly insane thing that immigrants, illegal immigrants to this country are all rapists and murderers. That's of course not what President Trump was saying. It's not what he meant. But they find a way to use Trump's loose way with words to just attack him. And so that's what ended up happening here once again. And just that Trump is able to get some ground made up here with the Latino community, and when you see the way that this multi-ethnic, the beginnings of it, let's not overstate it, but the beginnings of a multi-ethnic conservative or Republican coalition coming together, the fact that it would happen under a president who we've been told all along here was the worst. I mean, they've referred to Trump as a white supremacist. They've referred to Trump as emboldening members of the Klan. Think about the rhetoric that you've heard for 4 years. And he goes out and does better with the Latino vote than his predecessors in the Republican Party, substantially better. I mean, here, I can pull for you the New York Times racial and gender exit polls. You see white men went for Trump 58%. We can put that up on the screen. White women went for Trump 55%. 18% of black men went for Donald Trump. That's a stunning figure based on what you usually see in presidential elections for a Republican. That's well beyond the norm, much more than would have been expected. Trump also doubled his share among black women voters, up to 8%. Latino men, this is the real wow moment, I think, for people. Latino men, 36% for Donald Trump. That can be a game changer. I mean, that's a real basis on which to build going forward. Now, Republicans, to be fair, in the past have had some pretty strong showings among the Latino community. And when you're talking about what we saw on election night, where in southern Miami, or southern Florida, in Miami-Dade County, you had a big surge of Cuban-American voters, it's believed, who voted strongly for Donald Trump, and that made a big difference in Trump's handy win in Florida. But when you add all this together, you see this trend, this trajectory. It's in opposition to what we've been told all along is a central theme of the Trump presidency, which is that he is dividing us along racial lines, that he engages in all this evil racial demagoguery and all this stuff, all this horrific stuff that is constantly being thrown at this president. Well, guess what? That was all a lie. That's just a narrative. It's talking about how the Trump administration is somehow tied in with white supremacy and all this other stuff. This was a smear that the Democrats and the mainstream media leveled against this president for years. But when we're talking about our fellow Americans who are black or who are Hispanic, there were large numbers of them who, under Trump specifically, decided that they wanted to give the Republican Party a chance. How does that make any sense? I mean, they weren't saying Mitt Romney was a white supremacist, so why would somebody who's black or Latino America come out for Donald Trump when they wouldn't go out for the previous Republican contender? Maybe because the media was lying to all of us the whole time. They were lying because it makes them feel good to trash other people, specifically Republicans, as being racially insensitive or just being flat out racist, and because it's useful for their quest for power. It may have even worked this time around. We'll see how this election shakes out. Unfortunately, the lies they've told about this president may have come in very handy for them, and they could benefit from it. But the numbers don't lie, friends. This could be the beginning of something really wonderful for the Republican Party, a Republican Party that brings in people that have historically not felt as comfortable under the banner of the GOP. We want to bring them all in. I want them all joining us. The more, the merrier. And Trump may have just broken open this doorway for everybody. So we'll have to see how that goes. We'll have more on the president's performance last night with First TV contributor Rob Smith coming up here in just a moment. Welcome back. Last night, as the votes were being counted, we saw all sorts of bizarre, deranged commentary from the mainstream media, but this one may take the cake. Here is MSNBC's Jason Johnson attacking white people for voting for Donald Trump. Listen.
I think it's very important when we look at the lower numbers for Latinos, Biden underperforming with Latinos, Biden underperforming with African Americans. I think we also have to remember to put the focus in the right place, though. This is about white folks. This is about white people who saw a president who was corrupt and sexist and violent and mismanaged an entire pandemic that's killed over 230,000 people by the election, and they said, I want some more of that. So even if every single black person and every single Latino person had come out and said, hey, we're going to support Joe Biden, it wouldn't have been enough to overcome the number of white people who are okay with Trump and his mini version of Trumpism.
There you have it. Here with reaction is Turning Point USA and the first contributor, Rob Smith. Rob, let's just start with this. I was under the impression the election was about all Americans, but you got an MSNBC contributor here who's saying that it's about white people who did bad things in this election, in their choice. What do you say?
I say this is the same playbook that they've been going on since 2016. Remember in 2016 when kind of the same thing happened, Hillary Clinton vastly underperformed, and they were going to have this soul-searching moment, the Democrat Party and the left, to see what could we have possibly done for this. They actually have performed terribly last night, even though everything is still in disarray, and I think that Trump will end up being vindicated, and he will actually end up calling victory. But this is the stuff that they do. You see lots of prominent black voices on the left talking about white supremacy. Again, you got Joy Reid on MSNBC calling Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas Uncle Clarence. Obviously, a thinly veiled swipe at the Uncle Tom and coon racial slur against black Republicans. But they still don't get it. And what they also don't get is the fact that this was not just white people, okay, that were showing up for Trump last night. He got, I think that he increased the black vote by 33% from 2016. He increased the gay and lesbian vote. They doubled the gay and lesbian vote. So there are a lot of different people that are really into this message of a coalition of people that are defined by populism in America first and love for America. These people that are in their cable news bubbles where all they have to do is sit and rant into a camera about white supremacy and how all white people are racist and get hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to do so are completely missing the point again, Buck.
Now, we have some really interesting info here. I mean, first of all, if we're talking about exit polls for the black vote specifically, we could put that on the screen for everybody. Trump dramatically, you can kind of see it there, but I mean, Trump dramatically overperformed among what is usually expected with the GOP. So black men there, 18% for Donald Trump. Usually GOP numbers are more like 9%. So yeah. He pretty much doubled the standard, every 4 years GOP level of black voter support. And Rob, what's amazing to me is the first reaction from so many in the press, as we're seeing here, is, well, he's still a racist and America is still full of white supremacy and Donald Trump is awful, instead of maybe we missed something, because not only did Donald Trump outperform the GOP, after 4 years of him being president, he got more of the black vote. So how do they explain this?
They explain it by calling every black person that supports Trump some sort of agent of white supremacy, some sort of self-hating racist. They don't get into the facts. They will not understand, and they never will understand, how many people are turned off by their kind of reckless use of identity politics. And the way that they use identity politics on the left is to say that if you're a black, you're a victim. If you're a Latino, you're a victim. If you're a gay and lesbian, you're a victim. And you need to be with us as the left and the Democrats, because we will protect you against those evil, racist, sexist, stupid, homophobic conservatives. That is a message that is not resonating with a vast majority. And a lot of African Americans, a lot of Latinos, a lot of gays and lesbians are really tuning out to that. And I think that they're tuning into an America First idea that President Trump and this new GOP coalition is pushing forward. But also, look, a law and order message, an economy message, all of that stuff really does still factor in with minority voters. And they think that we are single issue voters, and they think that we can be manipulated and always pushed by the BLM stuff and the quote unquote white supremacy stuff and all of the BLM cases, when the vast majority of African Americans want what all other Americans want, which is prosperity, security, and a path towards the American dream. And the left has to accept the fact that Donald Trump and this GOP right now are more effective messengers of that dream for a lot of people.
I spoke today to a friend of mine who's on the left and who's a Democrat, also is a Bernie Sanders voter. He's black. Mark Lamont Hill, you may know him. And we were having this discussion about the election. And one thing that he pointed out was, which the left finds particularly irksome, even among these numbers, is that Trump not only increased his share of the African-American vote, but doubled, we have this number for you, the black female vote for Donald Trump from 4%, which granted is not a large number, but doubling your vote among any constituency in a tightly contested election like this obviously really matters. But more than that, there's also this indicator, and you alluded to this before, of what seems to be a multi-ethnic coalition of people from mostly from the working class who are united about America, about pride in their country, and about their interests as workers, and not just kind of living at the whims of the plutocrats that reign above us all, whether in the tech media, the Democrat DNC apparatus. What do you think was motivating specifically the black female vote to come out for Trump the way that it did?
Absolutely. So, in the Florida governor race, which got called for, obviously, Ron DeSantis as our governor, something that really didn't make a lot of national media is the fact that DeSantis got 18% of the black female vote here. And the reason why he got that is because he was a fearless advocate for school choice. Now, the Trump administration and their allies in the GOP have been very effective at portraying a message of school choice to black women, particularly black mothers, obviously. When they had an event in Atlanta when they rolled out the Platinum Plan, which was one of his coalition, his signature plans for Black America should he get a second term. School choice was a big part of that. He had a young man who was, I think, 21 years old, very successful, had just graduated school. He talked about the fact that school choice put him on a better path. And so the GOP has found, and you will see this, I think, in down ballot races, even when we're talking about congressional races, when we start looking into that data a little bit, school choice is something that really, really does resonate and matter to black female voters, particularly mothers. Obviously, sending their children to failing public schools is not working for them anymore. And they see that the Democrats and the left are nothing but a tool for teachers' unions. They want to do nothing but keep underperforming and failing schools open so that they continue to get that funding. And the school choice message really is resonating with these black female voters. And I think that there is a huge opportunity in a potential second term for them to hammer down that message even more and to have even more success with this group of people than even they did this year.
Do you think there was specific Trump outreach that made a difference here, or was it just mostly the policies, the overall approach of the administration?
It was absolutely specific outreach. You got Black Voices for Trump. You have people like Katrina Pearson and Paris Bernard, and all of these people who are reaching out and have been reaching out to Black voters in the way that no other Republican administration really had. And you are seeing the effects of this. And obviously, I'm just a digital media influencer. Obviously, I came out in court for the president, and I do what I can. But it's these people that are doing the work on the ground. All of these Black Voices for Trump centers that were open. Like, look, Trump took Florida. There's Black Voices for Trump centers all around Florida. This stuff matters. Reaching out to voters matters. And what the left does is they take these voters for granted, and they have lost some of the effectiveness of their messaging to these voters, because I'm not entirely sure if they have a message to give these voters other than President Trump and the Republicans are racist. It is not enough in 2020. It's just not.
Rob, always great to see you, man. Thanks for sharing your expertise on all matters political, and we'll have you back soon.
Absolutely, Buck. Thanks.
When we return, we'll take a look at some of the most ridiculous takes of the day in what we call tonight's Buckshot. Stay with us. It's time for a roundup of the worst takes from around the internet in a little segment we like to call the Buckshot. You guys remember that game? It was a great game. Played that one with my brothers all the time. First off, I have a fun announcement to make. I got my first ever blocked tweet today on Twitter. That's right. I said, notice how all the ballot counting shenanigans are happening in Democrat strongholds in states Democrats were behind in last night on election night and desperately need to win. You're going to hear a lot of, wow, we've just found 5,000 more Biden votes in the dumpster over the next 48 hours. And what's funny about that is, well, first of all, Twitter, as part of its big tech suppression campaign, decided that that's not allowed. What is the basis for that? I just want to know. I didn't say that had happened. I said, watch out for that happening. Is that a problem? If I say to somebody, hey, be careful, walking home from work, that's a bad neighborhood, can they say that I'm not being factual? I'm just making a commentary about what could happen in the future based on what I'm seeing. But it turns out, 538, the Nate Silver blog that got everything wrong in the election, they put out that there are two recent batches. This was at 4 p.m. today in the afternoon. 2 batches of Pennsylvania votes were found. 23,277 votes in Philadelphia. Every single one of them for Joe Biden. Well, you find 23,000 votes? They're all for one candidate? Oh, okay, cool. 5,300 votes in Luzerne County, nearly 4,000 of which were for Joe Biden. So maybe they were a little smarter there about, we gotta make this look a little bit more legit. 83% of the vote expected in as of that tweet. Trump's lead at that point was below 6 points. Looks like Trump probably still is going to hopefully hold PA. But exactly what I said in that tweet, that Twitter will not let people share or see based on disputed election thoughts, is actually happening. They are finding batches of votes that are all going to Joe Biden, and they just happen to be finding them in Democrat precincts where Democrats are in control. And you and I are supposed to see this and say, well, I guess there's nothing going on there. No big deal. So that's my first buckshot of the day. We got to obliterate that one out of the world. Also, Twitter, come on. My tweets are fire, all right? Let's not get crazy. Let's unleash the buck tweets. Unleash the Kraken. All right, we've also got, oh my. We talked about this one before, or rather our friend Rob Smith mentioned this. Over at MSNBC, here's how one of their hosts of her own show refers to a revered and still sitting Supreme Court justice. Let's hear it.
If somehow they manage to stumble into the Supreme Court, do any of you guys trust Uncle Clarence and Amy Coney Barrett and those guys to actually follow the letter of the law? No.
Uncle Clarence, quote unquote. That's what she calls Clarence Thomas. Now, obviously, if you ever said something like this about a liberal African-American member of the Supreme Court and you were a conservative, that would be probably the end of your job, maybe the end of your career. But different rules over at MSNBC, including for Ms. Reid, who is perhaps most famous for being the one who pioneered the technique of saying the FBI was investigating something when you're caught with bad stuff in your background. In her case, it was comments about the LGBTQ community from 10 years ago. That would have been considered, I think even then, and certainly now, homophobic. She said that there were hackers who broke in and that the FBI was investigating. I went on Tucker Carlson's show at the time and said, this is going to work, even though it's the most obvious laughable lie we've ever seen. What's amazing, though, is she got away with it and got promoted, whereas Steve Scully, I believe it was, tried the same technique when he was about to host the presidential debate, and he ended up getting suspended for it. So different rules for different people in the media, as you know. And if we're talking about fake news, I don't know if we can call him the king of fake news. He's kind of more the, maybe you could say he's the court jester of fake news. Here's Jim Acosta talking about how, well, we'll let Jim say it.
Jake, I think our founding fathers are probably rolling in their graves right now. They did not envision a president of the United States delegitimizing an American election, and that is what the president just did a few moments ago. It's historic, and it's historically awful.
He's a journalist, right? I mean, that's the official designation. I'm sure, you know, on his paychecks from Jeff Zucker, it probably says journalist. Does anyone really think that that's true? Does anyone think that CNN is still a journalistic enterprise? That's a rhetorical question, because anyone who thinks that's not very bright. But that's going to continue on, whether it ends up being a Biden presidency or a Trump presidency, which at this point we'll have to see. But CNN has completely debased whatever credibility it used to have in its Ahab-like quest to take down Donald Trump and to finish him off from this re-election. But yeah, that's right. They're citing the founding fathers, talking about how terrible it is. Remember, Trump said, I think that we won, and that was an evil crime against the Constitution, according to all the journos who had been, well, lying about him for 4 years with Russia collusion and cheered on the most farcical impeachment in history. But when Joe Biden goes out and says, if all the votes are counted, we won. I mean, it's like a conditional step maybe, but it's the same thing. You're saying you won the election, unless the other side cheats. But notice, only one of those people forces the founding fathers to roll over in their graves. And then, does anyone miss Mustache Bolton? I don't know. I don't know why we're bringing him back, but here's what why are we, this guy's, oh, that's right, it's buckshot, so we're looking for the worst. Here's the worst, Bolton.
I feel pretty unhappy this morning, too. I think the comments President Trump made a few hours ago, where he basically said that he was winning, had won, but now the election would be stolen from him, were some of the most irresponsible comments that a president of the United States has ever made. We don't know what the outcome will be. It's entirely possible Trump could win, but he has cast doubt on the integrity of the entire electoral process purely for his own personal advantage. It's a disgrace.
These lunatics were convincing the whole country and convinced themselves that Donald Trump stole the last election through some Kremlin plot with Putin for which they never had any evidence. And now they want to give us lectures on legitimacy and respecting the outcome of the will of the people. We're going to have a sense of humor, my friends, going forward no matter what, especially if Joe Biden ends up being the president. Good God forbid. But that's it for this inaugural edition of Hold the Line with Buck Sexton. You can catch us here every weekday, and I certainly hope that you do so. Thanks for being here. Shields high.